Hey guys, welcome to the Rubin Report. I'm still Dave Rubin. I've got Desi Doyen, Andy Riesmeyer with me, and let's get right to it. Baltimore is considering a curfew for teenagers. That's right. In a preliminary vote, the city council approved a bill that could make Baltimore's curfew laws among the strictest in the country. This started because of a bunch of teens rampaging through a 7-Eleven last year, a lot of vandalizing and stuff like that. We've got some details on the curfew. Kids under the age of 14 would need to be home by 9 p.m. year-round. Kids age 14 to 16 would have a curfew of 10 p.m. on weeknights during the school year and 11 p.m. on weekends. There would also be a daytime curfew during school hours, and more than one citation could result in a hefty fine. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't think we need the nanny state. That leads then to the police state, which then leads to the militarized state. I've watched a lot of science fiction movies.
We've seen this movie before.
We've seen this movie before. Yeah, all right, just take it away.
Well, I agree with you. I think this is way overkill because it's taking something that did happen, a real incident, which did frighten people. You know, there was a gang of teenagers running around, and you know, I don't know exactly how much havoc they wreaked or wrought.
As teenagers do, and we do see these videos popping up in, it's always in 7-Elevens, right? For some reason, teenagers decide to go in there and they snap up all the Slim Jims.
But you know, a curfew isn't necessarily going to make any difference on that. You have to have a police officer or other official there to actually catch them in the act of not meeting their curfew and then give them a ticket at the time. So all you have to do is just not let the cops catch you, and then boom, curfew is useless. It also seems to me to be overly restrictive. You know, you've got kids who have to work after school. You have kids who have to, have late night rehearsals and theater, for example. You know, you have to. I just think it's too restrictive, and it basically punishes all kids for just a few kids who are unable to find something to do with themselves.
Right.
So.
9 p.m. Should kids be in bed at 9? I mean, basically, you have to be home playing video games. Like, you can't even be out in a park chasing a ball, perhaps.
Yeah.
What were you doing at 9 p.m.?
Oh God, the last night? Preparing for today. Thank you very much. Yeah, and like the theater kids are the ones who are definitely going out and causing all the havoc.
You're saying that it sweeps in a lot of kids that wouldn't necessarily be the ones that are supposed to be targeted by this.
Yeah. My biggest issue, I totally agree, is that this is conditioning these kids at a very young age to know that if they or their peers
step out of line,
then the government comes in and says, you guys cannot be trusted with freedom. You have to be contained and restrained in your homes. And I think that really sends a bad message to somebody who just sort of grows up and gets that idea at a young age that they're going to be taken control of.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's why the part about the school day, that the curfew would be, warranted during the school day, is even worse to me than the nighttime thing, because playing hooky is like part of growing up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a great episode where The Simpsons, where Bart doesn't go to school, and the whole episode is Principal Skinner chasing him around town. Like, that's a part of growing up and fighting the system and not being conditioned to always believe in power. So does that part seem worse maybe than the nighttime part?
To me,
skip a day of school.
I know. Ferris Bueller's Day Off could never ever happen in Baltimore. And come on, that's an iconic film. So one of the other parts about it is that they're going to find the parents. And I think that if you are a parent and you are, say, working 2 jobs and you're not able to be home in the evenings, and so obviously sometimes teenagers are going to go do impulsive things like run around when they don't have somebody. So it seems better to not punish the parents who may not have the resources to ensure that their teenagers are occupied in something constructive. Maybe the city could turn that money instead over to programs and places for kids to go.
Right. So you're punishing the people who already are behind.
But yeah, it would. I would generally guess that parents who have to be at work at night would not appreciate having to be fined for something because they don't have the resources to give their kids something to do.
Yeah.
There are policies that show that if you provide basketball courts, recreation centers, places for kids to go, teens to go that are safe, they'll go there.
Yeah, I remember growing up, and my dad would always be trying to get me out of the basement playing video games with my friends, and I always remember thinking, if there was a lit basketball court at night, we would have been running around, but there were no lit basketball courts. Kids want to be outside, I think, generally. Yeah, and I say this as a big video game.
I don't know what pre-Thomas Edison world you grew up in where there weren't basketball courts, and I guess that maybe that's...
I grew up on the wrong side of tracks.
Apparently, I don't know.
It was pretty rough.
But
the other side, they had the lit basketball courts.
I think that the crazy thing is, especially summer is coming up, July 4th, what are they going to have to leave before the fireworks start at 9 p.m.? I mean, it just seems absurdly overreaching. But the
right.
real problem,
well, I guess they could probably be out with their parents. I'm sure there's part of
well,
this.
But I mean, I'm not gonna. When I was 15, I wasn't going out with my parents to go watch fireworks. Sorry, Mom and Dad. I think the real problem, obviously, is the kids are acting out. This is not addressing the real issue here.
Right.
What we should do is empower adults with the ability to just beat the shit out of these kids if they get out of line. And then, because if there's consequence that's related to the act of acting out, you know, and if the police aren't there, you know, just be like, well, I had to give him a whooping because he was traipsing through the 7-Eleven. You know, I mean,
I didn't think we were going to go into the pro beating kids realm with
all
this.
All about controversy, YouTube commenters.
Yeah.
All about stirring it up.
So playing the devil's advocate a little bit. So I'll give you the child beating thing. Is it maybe, or is some of this may be okay at the most local level? That if there is a town that something was really, I personally don't agree with
like
this.
Like the footloose level? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just really at the really micro level, if there was a little town somewhere where just all hell was breaking loose, that the local authority, I guess, even though
yeah, that's probably an extreme case, like you say. You know, I could maybe see that happening in some case where
zombies were around,
exactly,
you wouldn't want the kids out at night.
In a zombie apocalypse, you're definitely going to need a curfew.
Yes.
So, you know, but no, I don't really see why they want to. Well, I mean, actually, I take that back. I do see why they would prefer to put in a curfew because it actually requires very little from the city as far as resource. It just means that the cops get to go find kids to ticket, and then it's a little bit more source of revenue for the city because they get to find parents. But you know, I can see them not wanting to put the effort into actually dealing with the problem and creating a solution to the problem rather than just, you know, putting a Band-Aid on it.
Wow, a solution to a problem rather than conditioning kids to think that they're criminals. Not the worst idea I've ever heard. All right, let's talk about the environment. There were 2 studies released this week announcing that a large ice sheet in West Antarctica is beginning to melt, which might start the process of sea level rising. Not good. We've got a bit of information for you. So this study from the University of Washington concluded that the collapse of the Thwaites Glacier is already underway. This process could be completed within the next few centuries and would cause the ocean to rise by nearly 2 feet. Because that glacier is currently acting as a barrier for the rest of the ice sheet, its collapse could ultimately trigger a 10 to 13 foot rise in global sea levels. And we've got some info from a NASA study also. The study predicted a 4-foot rise in sea levels as the melting rate accelerates in the Amundsen Sea sector. Winds in the Antarctic are pulling warm water to the surface and causing the ice to melt. Global warming is a contributing factor, but not the sole cause. Natural, non-human induced changes in climate across the globe might also be at fault. So I wanted to start with that part, and I'm going to go to our science and green person first. So what they're basically saying here is that this is a combo of man-made climate change and that things are just changing on Earth just because of natural processes. Is that accepted in the scientific community at this point, that there's 2 things happening here?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's something where, you know, when you get down into the nuance of these studies, they're talking about, you know, there is the natural processes, you know, the natural oscillations that the ocean currents and the winds go through and global temperatures, you know, but there's also then that human-induced influence that kicks it up a notch. So that's kind of what they're talking about.
So you believe in climate change? Is that what you're telling me?
I accept the science of climate change. Okay. Absolutely, I do.
Controversy.
But, you know, what I think is most shocking about this is part of it is your definition of collapse. You know, when the public, the general public hears the word collapse, they think, oh my God, it's going right now. And when they're talking about it in science terms, in this specific thing with glaciers, they're talking about, you know, there is a point after which it is not ever going to return. That's irreversible, and it will lead to the eventual collapse. You know, so scientifically, it's more of a slow collapse. Obviously, it's going to take, you know, they estimate about 200 years or so at the minimum for this specific glacier, the Thwaites Glacier, to melt, and that is going to then be the issue with the West Antarctic ice sheet, which is, you know, massive. Yeah, it covers half that continent, and that's going to take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's still going to be very important for all coastal cities.
Am I making this up? It's something like 20 times the size of Manhattan, or something like that.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, when you realize Antarctica is a continent, an actual continent, and I forget how big it is in comparison to, say, the North American continent, but it is darn huge, and it is going to be a problem. You know, when you know, we're not just talking about this specific glacier being the only one that's melting. It just happens to be the one that they looked at in this particular study that's melting quite quickly. We have glaciers melting all over the world, and we have Greenland ice melt as well. So all of these together cumulatively are going to raise sea levels as well. And there's really, when you get to this irreversible place, you know, they're saying we don't see any way that these ice sheets are going to be stopped. There's no mountain range underneath there. There's nothing to stop it.
So is part of the problem that this just happens so slowly, as Desi's saying? I think that's sort of, we deal with things, especially our politicians, we don't deal with issues of today, so we definitely aren't going to deal with issues of tomorrow. So as part of this, that it's just happening so slowly that one day it's just going to keep rising, keep rising, keep rising, and then we'll just be swimming, and everyone will go, oh, we always swam, because I don't remember anybody that didn't swim all the time.
Waterworld will really be more like actual history at that point. I think that, you know, unfortunately, maybe for the climate change science, it has been so sort of hijacked as a political tool that I think when people see it, even if there is science behind it or whatever, they are very quick to say, no, this is definitely just somebody using it to trump up some kind of agenda. And I think that that's unfortunate because indeed, you know, we have seen so much evidence come out to say that, you know, there is a certain point where we are doing things that are harmful to the country. Just America.
Just America.
That's it. Who cares about everybody else? No, to the world. However, on that note, I did look at some of the sea levels. If you look at Los Angeles in 100 years, if we, 200 years or so, if we have a 10-foot increase in sea levels, the only people that will be affected are those living in Marina Del Rey. And let's be honest, they'll all be dead by that time. So.
You really wanted to get there with that.
Yeah, did you see it?
I could see it coming. I could see it coming. Is part of this, so I obviously believe in climate change. I believe these things are happening. But is part of this just sort of what human evolution is all about? Like, we're going to destroy this Earth. I feel like it's just sort of the way evolution is. We're going to destroy it, and then we're going to go somewhere else, and that's why we're exploring space, because everyone knows we're going to do that.
Well, there's a couple different things, if I may. First of all, I would recommend that you say I accept the science, because if you say I believe in climate change, then it implies a religion, and you know, and that's bullshit, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you accept the science or you do not accept the science.
I will amend it right now. I accept the science.
There
I'm
you
still
go.
in the belief phase, personally. So.
But then, when it comes to human nature, I think you are absolutely right that there is a part of evolution, you know, where essentially species, and you know, obviously we're the most advanced sentient species that's walked the earth, but previously,
I'm not sold on that,
right
but
now,
that's a different thing
we're
altogether.
more sentient. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
We can actually think about what we're doing, unlike you know most species.
Yeah.
And what tends to happen in nature is that a species will expand into its territory and expand into its range until it uses up all the resources. And you know, once it uses up all the resources, nature has a pretty, you know, swift and efficient way of cutting that species back to size so that it fits within its environment. So we're kind of following along with that same natural progression. We do have the choice, though. We can at any time stop that. And I think, you know, that's the whole point of science is, you know, using science to be able to predict stuff. Otherwise, why bother?
Yeah. Do you think science is having a little bit of a comeback right now? I think Cosmos on Fox and, you know, it's getting some good buzz. There is a sense of like, we need to be a little more scientifically literate in this country. And then stories like this, I think, sort of prove that.
Don't call it a comeback. I mean, I think that science, for whatever reason, has like this really bad rap.
Yeah.
Which is really strange because
everything we have is based in science.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems so obvious, you know. I mean, it goes without saying. I certainly hope so. You know, as a child of science, I would hope so.
Oh, I think it is definitely more popular now than it used to be. Not just with Cosmos, but you know that Facebook, I fucking love science.
Yeah.
That is people, you know, I think with CSI, the TV show, people sort of got interested in the science.
Science, though.
You know, and I think that's popularizing the concept of science. It's popularizing the ideas of the scientific method, and I think with that comes more engagement from the public. Although, you know, we do have a problem with a very strong effort culturally by a certain, you know, a group of evangelical right-wingers who insist that, you know, we have to include religion in our science classes. And, you know, we've had to beat back that particular onslaught periodically since the 20s.
So that's the part that I don't understand, and this will be the final thought on this. Like, the part of these people that simply don't believe in the evidence, I don't get what their faith has to do with this. Why can't you have faith in a higher being or whatever your religious beliefs are and still believe that humans are doing things? Give me an answer to that, both of you. Andy?
Man, I really think that it comes down to skepticism based on what I just talked about earlier, which is there are people who use it for agenda, you know, point making. When you are on the opposite side of that, if you're a conservative, you see man-made climate change historically being an issue that is sort of championed by the left. and downplayed by the right. So it's not even about whether or not it's real or not. It's about this is something that somebody else says on my opposing team. So I'm gonna disagree with
Right.
it.
It's just about the endless bipolar nature of everything
well, it's
we
tied
do.
into your tribal identity. I mean, people have a cultural identity, and they tend to filter the news and any other information they get through that cultural identity. And so if it doesn't fit with that cultural identity, then they reject it. Although, I will say there are evangelical Christian scientists. You know, there's a climate scientist named Katherine Hayhoe who is doing a great job of trying to, I know, she's the most adorable climate scientist that has ever existed. Yes, she's the cutest thing. And she also is able to sort of be an ambassador of science to these religious groups and say, hey, you know, you don't have to believe that the world is more than 6,000 years old in order to understand physics. You know, you can say that, hey, God created the world. He might also have created physics. Yeah. And so we're just figuring out how it works. So it's
can't we just get to a place where we can agree that, like, we don't know everything? Science doesn't explain everything, and religion certainly can't do that either necessarily.
Andy, we cannot get to that place, but we've got to move on. A new Gallup poll suggests that going to prestigious colleges doesn't actually make us any happier in life or in work. This comes from a survey of 29,000 college graduates by Purdue University, and let's look at the findings. 5 in 6 report doing great in at least one sphere: sense of purpose, financial security, physical health, close relationships, or community pride. Only 11% are thriving in all 5 areas of well-being, and the percentages did not vary based on whether the grads went to a top 100 school in the U.S. News and World Report rankings or one of the bottom 100. So this is kind of interesting because we put so much emphasis on going to the right college, no matter how much it costs, and apparently it costs a lot these days. I went to a New York State school, SUNY Binghamton, which is a perfectly fine school, pretty good academic school. I smoked a lot of pot there. I learned some stuff. I studied politics, so I guess something translated into my life now. Does this surprise you or not surprise you that going to these better schools isn't actually equating to any sort of bigger sense of fulfillment in life?
It's surprising to NPR, who thinks that you know, academia is the end-all be-all. Yeah. No, it's not surprising to me because, well, first of all, Purdue also is full of miserable people. I'm from Indiana, and like that's why you would probably think that if you went to Purdue.
Well, the study was by Purdue.
But I think a little bit of tampering might have gone on there, so they would just try to.
There's a little shouting.
That's right.
Got it.
No, I didn't go to college in the traditional sense, meaning I didn't go to college. Oh. I went for about a year and a half.
Well, I did not. No, the booker did not tell me that. This changes.
And I got lucky that I am working in an industry where it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to go to college to work in television. But you know,
the industry of talking about
things that are important. I know, I just discredited my entire self. But you know, you can read a lot. The access to information, it's like, I went to college with a lot of kids. I hire a lot of college kids, and they're really dumb. They're like drunk. They have this sheepish mind mentality that, like, sorry guys. You know, it's just, I think that, at least to me, as I've gotten in my later 20s, I realized that it's a lot less important about where you went to school and more about like what you can actually do on a daily basis and how like connected you are with knowledge.
Yeah. So what does this say about our college system? Because you'd like to think that if you go to a good school, you will get a good job, you will have more money, you will somehow be happier. I think that's sort of the theme in America, that's sort of how it's going to work, and yet we're finding out that that's
I think it's wonderful. I think it's fabulous. I'm glad to hear this because, you know, so many of the people that I've met, you know, just all walks, who will talk about how, oh, you know, you had to go to a prestigious university if you wanted to get into this echelon of society. And if that means that you can still be happy and still have a fulfilling career and still do work that you think is important and satisfactory to you, then it's wonderful that you can go to just a regular old state school and still be able to achieve those things. You know, one of the things that they don't talk about in this particular study is about the network that you get from going to an elite university. So I think that can have a very large impact on your ability to get a job right out of graduation in the industry of your choice. But beyond that, if it doesn't make you happier, I think that that's really a boost to everybody who wants to go to college and then feels like they're somehow starting off at a deficit because they didn't go to an elite university.
Yeah, is this also part of this thing that colleges, people are talking about this now, that colleges colleges are pricing themselves out of relevance, that we don't have a great economy, obviously. People can't afford to go to these places anymore. And then they're finding out that college graduates aren't getting the jobs that they used to get. So is college as like just a general thing becoming somewhat obsolete?
I mean, if you ask me, yes.
Coming from the guy who
and the reason I didn't go was because I had used college as a way to open a bunch of doors where I could like work my ass off and then have opportunities. That it happened way sooner than I had actually planned on. That was like, for me, you know, to work with Larry King, it was like I couldn't pass up that opportunity to have that happen for me. So it was like I probably would have continued to go to school. I just got really lucky. And you know, I have the idea that like for the pursuit of knowledge, I would probably go back someday if this whole thing goes away. So,
well, you know, now there are issues with, you know, in some places, like if you needed to get a job in a regular industry, not an entertainment or
joke.
Well, I don't call it a joke industry. I mean more like if you need to get a job in an engineering field, then you must have that. If you want to work in one of these other, you know, capacities, you must have a degree. So knowing that it's actually possible is pretty cool. But you know, remember there's a student loan crisis as well, and I think that also negatively impacts people's happiness and satisfaction later on when you are, I don't know, struggling under crushing debt.
So you're saying if you went to a prestigious college and then you got out of it and you were $100,000 in debt, it might affect your general state of well-being.
Yeah, you might be a little less happy about stuff. You know, but there was a good point in that article, in that specific study, about how good teachers and good mentors really made a big difference in those people that reported high satisfaction. So I think that is a great avenue to look at. You know, how do we get better teachers? You know, because if people are satisfied with their lives 10, 20 years on because they had a teacher who cared about them, who was a really good teacher, you know, I think that shows a great avenue for which, you know, through which we can create, you know, better outcomes for people, focusing on the teachers and the mentoring.
And sometimes you can get that teacher in high school. It doesn't have to be from college.
But good teachers being this launching point for a good life, I think that's really neat.
I like that ending. Okay, let's move on and talk about weed. We're going from college to weed. Those sort of go hand in hand. We haven't done anything on weed in a couple weeks, but two stories popped up in the last couple days that I thought were really interesting. So first off, the feds right now are seeking prison time for a 70-year-old medical marijuana patient who was growing weed on his personal property in Washington, the state of Washington, where medical marijuana is legal. They found about 70 pot plants. They also did find some guns, but he wasn't doing anything illegal per se by the state laws. But again, this is the feds that stepped in and did this because medical marijuana is obviously not legal at the federal level. And I think this is really interesting because to me, I want to start with Obama here because I think he's had this both ways. He makes it seem like he's the cool, hip, weed-smoking president, right? And he talks about weed all the time and he even said about 2 months ago the thing about, you know, weed is no worse than, you know, having a couple of drinks or something. Yet he is in charge of the federal government, if I know anything about government, and he is the one that is still enforcing these laws that are allowing the feds to come in and close these places. So Obama. Start with Obama, and then we'll go backwards.
Well, so obviously, as president, he can't personally go through every bit of the government and make sure that they're doing what he tells them to. I find this very surprising because Eric Holder, the Attorney General, put out a guidance, what was it, 6 months ago, a year ago, saying that we are not going to focus on individual users. We're not going to focus on, you know, the nonviolent offenders. We're going to focus on people who are obviously involved in crime and drug trafficking. These people are obviously not involved in that. So I think that there's an issue with the U.S. Attorney in Washington State.
Right. So this is 100% against what Eric Holder said. By the way, the guy who did this, the 70-year-old medical marijuana patient, is facing 10 years in prison, as are some of his relatives that lived on the compound and a family friend. So is this just like the worst kind of government hypocrisy?
Oh, well, you know, I love the government so much. I would have to, you know, totally agree with you there. No, first of all, the 10 years is not, I don't think it's normal. They added years because he was found to be in possession of firearms.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know if this is a typical situation. I do think this is one of those things where as things change and as, you know, the sovereignty of states are recognized by the federal government, let's hope, as, you know, nationwide mentality towards this changes, and it looks like it's going in that direction, especially for somebody who's just doing it for medicinal purposes, for providing for people who have seizures, epilepsy, who have cancer. Yeah. And I think that naturally it'll change. This is just that weird space before we get to where we're going.
Yeah, so the medicinal part I want to get to in a second. But what is the angle here? This is one of those things where Obama says one thing and does something else, and I just can't figure out what is the point? What is he saying to Holder that they feel this is appropriate? I just don't get it.
I think this is a conflict between a U.S. attorney that is actually defying orders from the main office, essentially. I don't get the impression that Obama or Holder think that this is a wise use of resources.
Right. So why doesn't Holder just get on the phone and call
that I
this
don't
guy?
know. That I don't understand, because he could get on and say you need to stop doing this. This is a waste of resources. They're going after a 70-year-old man who owned guns, which is his right under the Second Amendment, because they were saying that he was using those guns in the commission of a crime, because federally having pot, growing weed on your property is against the law, even though it is not against the law in the state.
Right.
So it shouldn't be.
Those things are not even on the same playing field.
But they are in conflict, and there is a huge gray area of legal limbo. So for the U.S. attorney to then sort of defy, I think there's something else going on with this particular U.S. attorney, but I do not know what that is, because really it's completely illogical for him to be doing what he's doing.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get to the medicinal part in a sec, but shouldn't the Republicans, to me this seems like the type of thing where if they were smart, which they're not, and we know that, if they were smart they'd be like, this is the type of thing we should be fighting for, because it's fighting for states' rights, it's fighting for individual liberty. You'd get a lot of sympathy saying, I want someone who is sick to be able to do whatever it takes to feel better. Why don't they jump on board this thing?
I think it would alienate so much of their base, as far as the people who are of the generation who grew up with like those crazy videos in the 1960s of kids like smoking weed and ended up in like flop houses and shit.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's the only reason, but I agree with you. I mean, look, this is an opportunity for you to like be on the cutting edge of like the future. So why wouldn't you take it? But
and they could be taking a populist thing and saying, look what Obama's doing. That's why I don't get the Obama angle, and I don't get the Republican angle on this one.
I think you're right. I think it has to do with preconceived notions from the base, from the older generations who are less likely to be open to the idea of medical marijuana or even recreational marijuana.
Although, but let's be real. Like my parents, I'm sure, smoked way more weed than I ever did.
Yeah. So
well, that's because you didn't go to college.
I didn't go to college. You're right. You're right.
And
when you don't go to school, the drugs are just you can't find them.
Exactly.
They're just not there.
All right. So this brings me to the medicinal marijuana portion of this, which I also want to talk about, and this one even seems worse than the previous weed story. Patients who are using medicinal marijuana for pain and other chronic symptoms are getting turned down by insurers right now, even in states where medicinal marijuana is legal. Insurers are basically reluctant to cover it because of conflicting laws, because as far as the FDA is concerned, because it's the Federal Drug Administration, medicinal marijuana is not legal. So now we have people with cancer and AIDS and all kinds of other drugs that are finding something that is helping them and helping them deal with pain. And now again, we have the federal government coming in and stopping the insurers from allowing these people to medicate themselves. To me, this is like the worst of the worst.
Well, I got the impression that it was the insurance companies choosing not to.
It is, but it's because it's under the guise.
Legal limbo.
Right, yeah.
And because of that legal limbo, it's understandable that a big company would not want to step in the middle of that until it's actually figured out whether or not they are assisting in the commission of a crime by covering it with insurance versus not. So
yes,
I can
thank you for
understand
cleaning that up.
But what I would say is, insurance companies never really do want to add coverage for things. That means they have to pay out more money. They're not interested in that. So I can see them also saying, we'll just wait, because that means that we have to put out more money for something, and we're not going to do that if we don't have to.
Right. So like everything, does this just come down to money? Because to me, the FDA loves everything in pill form, and when you have everything in pill form, there's also 3 minutes of diarrhea and possible suicide and death and all that other stuff that comes with every one of those commercials. All the people dancing and they're happy, but they're also having diarrhea and death and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And thoughts of suicide.
They were inevitable anyway.
Yeah. So is this partially because marijuana just doesn't have, we don't have a pill yet. We don't have just that perfect pill. And also that when it comes out one day, which it will, it's not going to have all those side effects, because weed doesn't have those side effects.
Yeah.
So is this just like a failure of the system at the highest level?
Side effects, I don't know. I mean, it depends on who you talk to.
You get paranoid or whatever, but you're not
depends on how much you use, for sure.
I've never been with anyone who's smoking weed and suddenly had horrible diarrhea.
There you go.
You were lucky, sir. Let me tell you.
I've been around some good weed people.
Yeah, in Indiana, our weed isn't that good. You don't know what's going to happen. Usually it's laced with some kind of benzodiazepine or some crazy shit.
Which the FDA is totally for, by the way.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing? I thought I just made that up.
Yeah,
that sounds real, doesn't it?
It sounds real, might as well be.
It would be something that would give you diarrhea, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's something that starts with benzo that the FDA is for. So,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, close enough.
Benzoil. It's car oil, motor oil. Well, okay. Yes, it is money, and it does come down to money. Was that your question?
Yes.
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
But who's spending $1,000 a month on weed? Like
People who are very sick.
So yeah, if you're very sick, you could. I know. I saw this and I thought the same thing.
In that sense, like I know a guy who can cut that in half for you, because he'll give you as much as you ever want. But like that seems like a very large amount, even to the point if you were trying to medicate every day.
Yeah,
Right, but I don't want to get caught in the semantics of
No,
the,
but let's talk about, if you are somebody who is truly disabled by some kind of condition that makes it so you can't work, then yeah, you're going to be on disability, which pays very little, and then the only medication that gives you any relief is something that's not covered. I mean, I can understand it does put people who are poor because of their disability into a huge bind. I don't know how we solve that particular problem, because personally, I'm not sure it's a good idea to get the FDA involved in studying and testing and approving marijuana, because we've seen what they do with the pharmaceutical industry. And we see, I just
right.
see marijuana.
So where do you see that going?
I really don't know, because if they do, I see it turning into pill form. I see it, losing its effectiveness. I see it being a controlled market, and that means that big pharmaceuticals companies will take over, and then it kind of ruins it for everybody, because we've seen what happens with everything when the suits get involved.
Right. So, okay. So I'm on board that. So then, what do we do related to insurance then? So then that's the part.
Maybe there's a way for the federal government to end the legal limbo aspect and say, okay, if you're in a state that has decided to allow for recreational or medicinal marijuana, if you're in a state that does that, then we are not going to prosecute you, and give insurance companies direct and specific legal guidance that they can offer that without themselves getting into some kind of accessory related crime.
Right, which, going back to the previous story, that seems to be in line with the thinking of what Obama and Holder should be doing.
Why don't they do it?
They just don't seem to be doing it. Go ahead.
No, I just think that as far as the drug companies go, though, those need to be the people who step up and make an actually effective product. Because for all of the people who
But they're selling a lot of other shit.
Yeah, but it's another opportunity for them to do something right. They're not all horrible. I mean, they make a lot of really good things that help a lot of really sick people. And I think that they obviously wouldn't exist if they were killing everybody with diarrhea and nausea all the time. And I just want to, I think that as we go forward with this, as things change, it'll obviously, like I said before, it's just something that's sort of caught in this weird gray area right now.
Yeah, we're working through, I think, these issues. What I think one thing that could be done is when people make sure that they tell their representatives at the local, state, and national level, we want to make this legal and we want to end this legal limbo, and Congress has the power to do that, more so, I think, than Obama with executive actions. He can only do so much, but if it's built into the law, if we demand that of our representatives, there is a possibility that it could happen.
So to get us to demand that, do we need like a George Clooney to jump on board the weed thing publicly? Instead of, it seems like when you talk about weed and everyone, you go to the easy jokes. I get it. We could go to Snoop Dogg and Willie Nelson.
Woody
Harrelson. Do we need someone like a Clooney to literally get sick and then be like, this is how I'm helping myself, and that would be the thing that would get people to realize how screwed up the system is?
I think that would help. I don't know.
I'm not wishing sickness on George Clooney.
No, but having enough.
You looked at me like, oh Lord.
You're pondering.
No, I was not.
That
was not a shot at George Clooney.
I wasn't thinking
I wish him nothing but health.
I don't think he has to get sick. I would prefer it not that way.
Right.
That it's somebody who basically says
this
is a civil libertarian issue, and we can all basically say get the government out of our lives in this particular area, and just move forward with that. Maybe having a famous spokesperson, a celebrity spokesperson, would be the trick to help galvanize people to tell their representatives, but it's taken a long time to even get to the point where we are now, where we have
bring us home, Andy.
Laws.
Yeah, I don't know. There you go.
You don't want to besmirch the good name of George Clooney.
I think celebrities doing things that are political, I hate so much anyway, that it's an eye roller for me as somebody who doesn't watch TMZ every single day.
Right.
So I don't know.
So it would be ineffective.
For me, but my mind's already made up, so maybe I'm not a really good person to ask.
Yeah. All right, well, my well wishes are with George Clooney, and let's move on. This is fascinating. There is new data from Spotify showing just how badly our attention span is crumbling. You might have stopped watching this already. I'm only 6 seconds in, I think. They have shown that people are skipping songs to the point of addiction to it. Let's look at the research findings. Nearly a quarter of all songs on Spotify get skipped within 5 seconds of starting. That's basically 25%, a quarter. I'm not a mathematician, but I could do that. More than a third are skipped within 30 seconds. Nearly half of all songs are skipped at some point. So even if you love your who's popular with the kids, the Beyonce, you're still skipping her. And teens show the most inclination to skip, but there's an increase for those in their mid-40s. As well. I guess none of this should be surprising, right? We're all doing this all day long with our phones, and we're all tweeting, and I admit that I'm on this stuff all the time. But there's something I thought interesting that it's related to music now, too. Like, even music, we're losing our attention and our ability
fragmented attention. I find that to be the case. And actually, as I was reading this story, I realized I had a video playing in the background that I was supposed to also be listening to, but then I got bored, and so I went over and checked something else, and then I went, oh my gosh, I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
So.
Were you tweeting while I was reading that?
I
was looking away. Were you tweeting or Facebooking?
There's a different app involved there, but yes.
Yes.
No, yeah, but I think just given the opportunity to change what's happening, we're going to take it, right? I mean, how many times did you listen to the radio when a Nickelback song came on? You were like, Jesus.
Exactly.
Let's get through these. You know, I would have skipped it before 5 seconds was up. And I think if you have your playlist set up, you know, and you've got songs that you select to listen to, maybe you just don't feel like listening to it right then. Maybe you'll come back to it. And I don't know if it's necessarily an example or a reason to say like we're just so crazy and out of control. It's like we're doing what the whole point of the thing is. It's like to give you choice, and you're exercising your choice.
Yeah, so I'm glad you went there immediately, because I do agree with that as a basic principle, that maybe this is just the next step in this. We seem to think everything's bad, everything's getting faster and shorter and whatever, but I do think there's a chance that maybe we're allowing our brains to work on other things, because this short-term thing, you can do 5 things at once. You can now watch a video, and you could probably mute that video and have music on and be tweeting. And maybe we are rewiring. We've talked about the rewiring of our brains, and maybe we are rewiring in a good way. Is that possible?
Oh, I think absolutely. Our brains are, as humans, we are so adaptable, and our brains are adapting to this new reality that we've created for ourselves. And, maybe the reason why we're switching is because we really couldn't before. Before, you were limited to what was playing on the radio right then and whatever you could switch to that might be interesting, or your cassette tapes, So we had the fact that we're actually in a place now where we can choose for ourselves and have this wide menu to choose from on our own. Maybe that's what our brains naturally always wanted to do.
Yeah,
but couldn't, because the media didn't allow us to.
Yeah, and I think
the media, the way it comes out, the delivery system. I was trying to say.
Well, I think you're right about the radio thing, because this past weekend I was driving up to Davis. It's from LA. It's about a 6-hour drive, and I was doing the radio thing, just FM radio, and I realized how quickly. I don't even know if it was 5 seconds that I could hear a song and immediately switch. So maybe this isn't that new, do you think?
Well, there's a lot more garbage music out there, first of all. Because, no, for real.
Yeah.
Because I used to work in music. I was in a band. It's a lot easier to make music now. It's a lot easier to get your music on Spotify. You just have to basicbasically pay $49 and it shows up there. So it's like...
Oh, that's interesting. So you just think there's more garbage in general.
Absolutely
So that in itself...
The level of, the barriers to entry have come down so much with the advent of technology and recording technology specifically, that more people are able to make more things. If you search for a song that you like on Spotify, let's use your favorite Beyonce, like you were just talking.
Yes.
You will find the Beyonce
Frankly, I
song.
like Tina Turner more, but I was trying to...
Wow. Well, anyway, if you find Beyonce, now I'm off my track, thanks to Tina Turner, riding on the freeway, not me. If you look at that Beyonce song, there's going to be 4 different cover versions of that by like local bands from Idaho, and they're not very good. Sorry. So of course you're going to skip.
Right, so we've just made the pool bigger and bigger.
Well, I wonder how much we can extrapolate from this particular study. You know, great that they have all these metrics like Spotify that they can actually look and say, oh my God, look, when they peak at this time of the day, they
great
peak at this age.
For Spotify.
Indeed. You know, but as far as how much we can extrapolate from that, the actual fragmentation of attention spans from people, I think Spotify is very specific because, you know, it is more hands-on than just turning on something like Pandora in the background and just letting it choose for you, that randomization. So if it's more hands-on, then it's going to show more people are going to have more fragmented attention because it requires you to do that for the most part. But, you know, I don't know that that means that that is necessarily, one, a bad thing, and two, that it's happening really as much as this specific study would indicate. It may not be that it's like that as much for everybody. It may just be that that's because that's how Spotify works best.
Yeah, so I like that we're being pro-attention and anti-attention here. We're giving it both sides. But then I was thinking, you know, could we ever have a classical music come back? Where, you know what I mean, where you really listen to one piece for 20 minutes? Or could a Bohemian Rhapsody even ever be written now? You know, because we're so in this Katy Perry churned out, as you said, you know, like you now have these, when all these pop songs come out, there's literally teams of like 40 people just coming up with some stupid repetitive beat. Could we ever have sort of long form music actually come back, or is that really a thing of the past?
I think the nature of how the music business works today, you know, figuring out what the formula is to have a popular song, you're talking the difference between commercially popular versus artistic. So as long as artists have an opportunity to get their music and their work out to a wider audience, you know, we don't have the same system that we used to for classical music. You know, if they're able to still get it out there, then I think, yeah, we will still have a resurgence or the survival of classical music in longer form pieces.
I think
but that's a big
better
question.
Than resurgence.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing about having more opportunities to get more music out is that then as fan bases go, they're able to be segmented more. So if you're just into that one thing, you can go and find that. The formulaic process of the music industry has been going on since, I don't know, 1950, I'm sure. I mean, it's like, you know, you look at a pop song then, you look at a pop song now, you've got chord progressions, you've got beats that are very much the same. They're just recycled over and over. But if you're a consumer, you are no longer just getting your music from the MTVs or the radio. You know, you can go out, and if you would like to listen to a Coltrane record, go for it. You know, do it. Or the new version of a Coltrane record, or whatever that is. Tina Turner in your case. Yeah.
Well, I wonder how many of you actually watched this entire video. That would be, I guess, the ultimate lesson in this. Would be that. So let us know in the comments down below. And we've got one more for you. Let's talk about robot sex. We talk a lot about robots. We talk a lot about sex. So I really thought this story would be pretty perfect. A new survey found that 1 in 5 people in the UK would be willing to have sex with a robot. 2,000 people were quizzed on their attitudes towards androids. And 46% surveyed admitted that they'd either have sex with a robot or not judge others who chose to have robot sex. To me, this is just the way things are going. Yes, people will start having sex with robots in the not too distant future, and they're probably partly doing it already in the online thing and all that. Would you have sex with a robot, Desi Doyen?
You know, I guess it would depend on the robot. I really can't imagine.
So if it was a Jude Law robot from AI.
Well, you know,
remember that?
I remember that. Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense in the context of AI, where people are not allowed to reproduce anymore because the Earth is too small and can't sustain them. So
that movie was about?
That's kind of what it's. That was one of the parts of why it was.
Went on for my entire childhood.
So
I know. So you know, the idea of that, it makes sense in a logical sort of science fiction way.
I like how you took this immediately to the intellectual part. Would you have sex with a robot, Desi?
You know, I don't know. Like I said, it would depend on the robot. They're already doing this in Japan. I mean, they're already, if you ever happen to stumble upon any of the sex conventions from Japan, the photos from those are quite insane and interesting. And you're like, wow, okay, as long as you already have the money for that, then you can buy your own. And it's already happening now. So.
Yeah, so there is a movement in Japan called otaku, which is a movement for the rising number of men that are opting for relationships with virtual women. So that's not necessarily a robot. That's just a virtual.
But you can see it going to that place.
It's the next step before the Jude Law thing.
Is it?
Sex with robots, Andy?
No.
How do you feel about it?
No.
Not going to do it.
Well, we're so far off from Jude Law robot sex.
Exactly.
You know, if you look at these people, or these people, like, look, I'm already doing it.
Yes, you see?
Yeah. If you look at these robots, these androids, like, they are terrifying, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, Dweebcast, my show.
Yeah, pimp it out.
The number one prevailing rule is, the light just like freaked me out.
Yeah, the robots are taking over
they
right
know.
now.
The number one rule is that they will kill us. And so if you start submitting to them in the bedroom, they are going to be able to be much more persuasive when the apocalypse doesn't. If it comes, it will come.
So you're all right. So we'll just move to that for a second. You believe the robots will take over one day?
No, I mean, yes.
Yes. So the sex would just be dangerous because it'll facilitate it happening faster.
I think so. Yeah.
The general idea here.
Well, I had another idea that came up when I was reading it. Was, oh, wait a second, that kind of makes sense, not just in the context of the otaku in Japan that you were talking about, but also, what about, say, a country like China, where a one-child policy has resulted in a huge gender imbalance, you know, where there are more men and there aren't enough women for them to get married to. So you've got a whole generation or more of men who have no outlet for that. So when you got angry, horny men, what happens? Well, you get wars and stuff. Yeah. So maybe this is a good
robot.
idea.
Right. That was the first commercial. You just did it.
Never know.
Yep.
Be pro-peace. Fuck a robot.
Forward, you know.
Make cyber, not war.
Yeah.
Is that a good tagline?
Like cyber love?
Something, yeah, it's there. Well, then, of course, this will lead to ultimately robots having sex with robots. And then what about...
Robot babies?
What about...
Same-sex
robots. What about same-sex robots? I mean, it's all going to be there. What about robot-human marriage? They did an episode of Futurama about robosexual marriage, which was pretty perfect. But, I mean, if you just extrapolate this, I mean, someone will fall in love with their robot. There's a guy somewhere, I think, in the UK that's trying to marry his computer right now because he loves it so much, and you know, blah blah blah. So I mean, is that crazy to be thinking about all this stuff?
You know, I don't think it's crazy to be thinking about it. It might be premature, but eventually, I think we will probably have to discuss and figure out the ethics of all of this. I mean, I know it does.
What about premature robo-ejaculation?
Well, you know, is it right, you know, to use something? You know, is there an ethical issue with with relationships? You know, what if people abandon their relationships in order to have a robot that never complains and never asks you to, hey, do the dishes, you know, stuff like that.
If you let a robot's battery die, is that like neglectful homicide?
Is it killing
it?
Like,
I don't I wonder. Yeah, I mean, what I'm still trying to figure out is where we reach the difference between like a fleshlight, you know, and a blow-up doll, and then an actual android robot. You know, is this like that's the gateway drug, right, to robo?
Well, that's why I'm saying this is all happening. So you have the fleshlight, which is basically a piece of plastic that you can whack off with. What was the second thing you said? The fleshlight.
The blow-up doll.
Then the blow. Well, we had blow-up dolls back in the. So this is all just natural progression. It doesn't sex and porn just sort of lead the way. I mean, it's changed video, right, from beta or master beta to VHS,
so good.
You know, to digital video. So like sex just kind of leads the way, and we just follow, right?
Yeah, it does seem to be the thing that folks focus on mostly when they're working on technology. It's like, oh, let's not figure out a better way to, I don't know, feed the world. Let's instead figure out how to have better sex. You know, that's the driver of much of the technology, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't understand why we're so surprised by this or anything. You know, I mean, this does seem like the natural progression. I do think it's weird. You know, I don't know that I'm going to find myself in a robo parlor anytime soon.
You know, usually the people that are against robot sex are the ones secretly having it at home. You know what I mean? Meeting in an airport bathroom to have robot sex.
Maybe by the time that we have to address the robot sexual relationships, or the robosexuals, as they call them, we will at that point be letting dogs get married and to people and cats, and so by that time it won't be a big deal. You know?
All right. Well, on that note, I'm Dave Rubin and I'm pro robot sex. I want to thank Desi Doyen, Andy Riesmeyer. Their Twitters are right down below. And barring a robot revolution, we will do it again next week.